Вярвах аз, че вечно ще живее. Най-хубавите ми години от нея и после си замина, ала нощем още те търся. Като птица съм свободна, но на воля не отлитам. От години свикнала съм да обичам само тебе. Като птица съм свободна, но на воля не отлитам.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and as you can see by my surroundings, I'm no longer in Albania, or indeed abroad, but I'm back home. And I'm going to give my reflections firstly on the final few days in Albania, and then also on the trip as a whole. So when I last spoke to you, I'd just arrived in Tirana. We'd spent our night there, or a bit of a night because we'd arrived so late, and we were about to go out and explore the Albanian capital. We did that. We took a taxi in from the hotel, which was kind of on the highway between Durrës and Tirana, and we took this taxi in, and we went to the Bektashi World Headquarters. Now, the Bektashis are a very, very interesting Islamic sect. They're Shia Muslims, and I've come across them many years ago because a friend of mine, Fatma Mukhtar, in Bulgaria, she advised me to visit a particular shrine in Bulgaria called Demir Baba, which I find to be one of the most powerful and beautiful religious sites anywhere in the world. Absolutely gorgeous place. And it really moved me. And that is a Bektashi shrine. And the Bektashis they're a kind of Sufi movement. They are Shia, but they're very, very liberal. And they were spread by the Janissaries of the Ottoman army all across the Balkans. They're named after Haji Bektash, who I think he came from Sivas in Turkey originally. And they're quite mystical, very liberal. The girls don't wear a hijab, for example. They will drink alcohol. And I think women participate in the services. They may even be able to lead services some way. I'd say used to be very popular across the Balkans, less so now, although there are shrines like Demir Baba in Bulgaria. But they're mostly concentrated in Albania these days, where they make up a significant portion of the Muslim population. And their headquarters is in Tirana. Obviously, it's quite a new place because they were squashed under Enver Hoxha, as all religion was. It was the world's first atheist state. But we went to this headquarters, and it's in quite a poor part of town. It's quite run down, but the headquarters is really nice. And even though it's not that old, it's got a really nice vibe about it. We couldn't go into the museum of the main shrine because it was a special day. I think it's called Ashura. It's a big day in the Shia calendar. And the Baba, the head of the Bektashis, was there giving a speech. We actually saw him on the telly in the morning. And when we were there, we actually saw the Orthodox bishop, and I think it was a Catholic senior member of the Catholic clergy coming out. You know, they've been guests there. The Bektashis are very much into faith stuff, and there was the whole of like the Albanian press waiting outside. So we saw the TV cameras and stuff. But we went to the shrine where all the old Babas are buried, and I said a few prayers there. And I found it generally quite a beautiful place. Then after that, we decided to walk into Tirana. We had a coffee and then caught a bus for the rest of the way and wandered around Tirana. Now, I've been to Tirana before. I really like Tirana, although it's not a conventionally beautiful city. I just think it's got a great vibe. Much changed from when I was there in 2009. And I actually, not necessarily for the better, they've done up Skanderbeg Square, which is the main square, and I think they've done a really bad job of it. They seem to have like boxed off part of it, and there's all these overgrown trees and stuff, and so the original vision, which was this great like avenue, with the square on it, is kind of been destroyed a bit, and it just looks a bit bleak. I don't like what they've done to it. It's a shame because it was a big project of Edi Rama, who was the mayor of Tirana. He was world mayor for a while, and I generally quite like what Edi Rama does. But that project, I thought he got wrong, really wrong. And I think it's far less of a public place because of it. So yeah, I guess doing stuff up doesn't always work. Went to the mosque. I think it's called Etim Bey Mosque, which is on there, and it's an Ottoman mosque. And people who've spoken to me recently know that I had a bit of a bad experience in a mosque recently. We went to one in Bradford that was the most soul-destroying place going. It was a mosque that seemed designed to keep God out. It was like this bland community centre come prison cell type thing. It was a very strict Salafi mosque, that one was. Whereas the Etim Bey Mosque is what a mosque should be, and it really is a feast for the senses. It's got all these beautiful paintings. I think it's an 18th century mosque, it's Ottoman mosque. So the design's fairly standard. I mean, you've been in a few Ottoman mosques, you know what they are, but it's the paintings. And they've got all these cities. There's paintings of these cities. And I asked the caretaker, was it Istanbul? And he said, no, it's just fantastical cities. They've made up fantasy cities. And it's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful place. We then walked through the centre, past the old Daiti Hotel where the Secret Service used to be, listening in on people. To the pyramid. Now, the pyramid was built as Enver Hoxha's tomb and a shrine to him. When I was last there, it was derelict, and they were almost thinking of knocking it down. And I think they were going to knock it down, and there was a public protest to save it. So they're doing it up, and I think it's going to be a museum to the period of communism. But because we couldn't actually do anything because they were working on the pyramid then. So we went into the block, which is the area where the communist elite lived. And then took a photo next to Enver Hoxha's old house, the old communist dictator, which is a nice building. But again, yes, it's grander than what most people lived in, but it's not the millionaire's mansion that you would expect. They did live quite humbly, I suppose, as far as elites go. And then we walked through past a restaurant that's called Taiwan for some reason. It's quite a famous building in Tirana, to the Orthodox Cathedral, which was being built last time I went in. Bit of a modern building, not overly impressed, but yeah, it was interesting to go in there. And then back to Skanderbeg Square, and then we went to catch a taxi to the... I would have gone to the National Museum, which is great. I've been before, but that was shut for renovations. So anyway, we got this taxi to the edge of town. The driver spoke quite good English, and it turns out he was a university graduate, and he had studied English. And the bus station now is on this like kind of parking lot type thing on the edge of town. It didn't used to be there, and we booked onto a bus for Shkodra, which is Albania's third city, in an hour's time. So then we went to get something to eat, and I think we chanced upon the only gay guy in Albania, because it's quite a homophobic place, to be honest, but there was a very, very camp guy in a cafe where we got some toasties. And then we had the journey to Shkodra, and it's a 3-hour journey. It's only about 100 kilometres, and this is the problem with Albania, and it always was the problem in the past, and it's better in some areas, I believe. Like Mariam was saying, in the south it's good, but the road, it was literally stop, start all the way. It was just heavy traffic along a road that's clearly not big and wide enough for the amount of traffic, particularly, I guess, in the summer with all the tourists. Especially through Lecce, which is a town I'll talk about later, but it was just, really quite a horrendous journey. But we were on the bus there, and I read, and then we got to Shkodra. I met my friend Marian, who I knew. I used to work with him. He was my assistant when I was teaching ESOL. And it was just great to catch up with him. We had a meal with him. It was brilliant. And then we stayed for the rest of our trip in his apartment in the centre of Shkodra. So Shkodra is an interesting city. I've been before, but I do like it. It's probably the most Italian of Albania's cities. It's a majority Catholic city. Marian's actually Muslim, and there are Orthodox there as well, but most people are Catholic in Shkodra. And the architecture looks a bit Italian as well, and it's just got a really nice vibe to it. So we stayed there that night. The next morning we were going to go to Theth. Now Theth is incredibly beautiful village up in the mountains, very famous. You used to have to go on a 4x4 to get to it, but these days the road is better, so you can go in a normal car. But when we tried to get a taxi, they wanted $100, not $100, €100, which is worse, to go there. So instead we took the bus to Leisure, which we'd gone through the day before. And the reason is of course, Skanderbeg, who's the national hero, is buried in Leisure. He was buried in St. George's Cathedral, which, I say St. George, was it St. Nicholas? It was the cathedral in Leisure. And then it was later turned into a mosque. But then in Hodges' time, it was converted into a shrine for Skanderbeg. And it's got this really quite ridiculous kind of canopy over the whole ruined building. And the only other place I've seen something like that is Stalin's house in Gori. And I passed it on the road before. I thought, I've got to visit that place. So we went there. Also saw some remains of the ancient city of Lessos, which is basically the old version, the Illyrian city predecessor to Leisure. And then we went, we took a taxi up the hill to the castle. And Leisure Castle it's a world-class fortress. The views are incredible, but the actual fortress itself is brilliant. There's an underground bit. There's an old mosque in there. Absolutely incredible thing. And we were the only tourists there. Literally, we spent an hour there. We could have spent longer. It was unbelievable. So that was Leisure. We got a fourgon back, which is like a shared taxi minibus thing. And they dropped us off by Rozafa Castle, which is on the edge of Skodra. And we then went to that. Now, Rozafa is probably the most famous castle in Albania. It's the one that inspired Ismail Kadari when he wrote the incredible novel The Siege. It's also got a very beautiful mosque at the foot, the Lead Mosque, which I've seen before, but we didn't have time to go down to, but it's well worth checking out. But we climbed up to the castle and had a look around that. Again, I've been before. Thomas thought it was brilliant. But that was really quite touristy. There was several tour groups there, including a tour group of Arabs. And Arabs do seem to like visiting Albania, which is a new thing. I mean, nobody used to visit Albania. Certainly when I first went. My God, nobody did. But yeah, there was this tour group of Arabs there. And Marion says there have been quite a lot of Arab tourists coming to Albania. I don't know where. I was guessing Egyptian or maybe Jordanian or something. But yeah, and also a lot of Germans up there, and French and whatever. But so yeah, far more on the tourist trail is Rozafa, unlike Leisure Castle, and yet the two are not that different. So my recommendation would be get yourself to Leisure. So yeah, we went there, and then we walked back into the centre of Skodra, and then we met Marion and had a meal and chilled out and had a wander around again. One comment I love from Marion, he said, I love my city, he said, because look at it, you've got an Orthodox church here, a Catholic church there, and a mosque there, and we all get on together. And I don't think I've seen anywhere else, certainly not in the Balkans, with such religious tolerance that you have is in Albania. Albania has a lot of issues, but religious strife is not one of them. And that's so nice to see. And of course, it is so divided religiously. I mean, probably about 20% Catholic, about 15-20% Orthodox, and then probably about 15% Bektashi, and then the rest Sunni Muslim, and yet they all get on. And they have a saying that forget the church or the mosque, you are Albanian, and I think that's quite a nice way of looking at things. The next day we did go to Thethi. Marion had got to work, and he found us a minibus that would take us there for I think it was €20 each, and then of course we had to get back. Or no, was it €10 each? And I think we paid 40 to get back, so it cost us like 60 euros, which is a lot cheaper than the 100. So we went in very early in the morning, and they picked up people from all over, and it was this totally like we were not used to being in the tourist thing, And there was like a Japanese couple with a kid. There was an Austrian with a Czech and a kid. There was a couple of French. There was a couple of Dutch. There was Germans, and it was like this tourist crowd. It's like this very middle class, outdoorsy tourist crowd. Very similar to some of the people you'd get on Camino, to be honest, and these are people who wanted to exercise. These are not like the beach tourists. And when we actually slept a large part of the journey to Theth, but when I did wake, it was unbelievably beautiful. What an incredible scenery. And the road was really good, and apparently it was only finished last year. So we got there. It's such a beautiful place, also noticeably cooler because of high up in the mountains. And we hiked to this waterfall, which I didn't enjoy that much because there were so many people doing it. But on the way back, it was just us, and that was nice. And then we just kind of chilled out in this almost like Switzerland type retreat. There was a beautiful Catholic church. There was this incredible museum in an old house, and we were shown around by the woman who was a descendant of the people whose house it was. But the guy came, and he came in like full national dress and wanted to be photographed, looking like something from a postcard. We had a lovely meal in a restaurant. We had like the mountain kind of traditional mountain lunch there. It was great, and their version of fondue, which was interesting and tasty actually. It was good. I preferred it to the Swiss one, not so rich. But the highlight for me was the Kula. And the Kula, Kula means tower, and these are lock-in towers or segregation towers. And they basically, Albania had its own law code, the Canon of Lek, and it dated from the 15th century. And all religious groups followed it. And under this code, they used to have things called blood feuds. So the idea is if I kill someone from your family, you're entitled to get retribution on my family. So you can kill someone, whether it's me or not, it doesn't matter. But somebody is identified as the one you're going to kill, and unless they work out a deal, that person is going to get killed. And so they're living in fear of their life every time they leave their house. But these towers were places of sanctuary, and if you went to a tower, nobody could touch you in the tower because the moment you left, they could. So they're almost like prisons. And the idea is you would go in the tower, your family would bring you food, and then they would work out the deal. And these blood feuds could sometimes last a century or something. Really quite horrific. So the tower was really interesting, and then we had this journey back with this guy in a car, and we saw the scenery all the way back, including on the top of the pass there is a monument to Edith Durham. Now I've not mentioned Edith Durham before, but she was a British writer, and she's absolutely amazing, or was very much dead these days, but she lived in the Victorian era. And until she was 40, she never travelled. She basically was never married and looked after a sick mum. And then when her mum died, the doctor said for the sake of her constitution, she needed to travel. So she took a steamer trip to the Dalmatian coast. And she went to Serbia. She went to Montenegro and just fell in love with it. So kept coming back. And she fell in love first with Serbia, but then when she went to Albania, that was her true love. And she became this passionate advocate for anything Albanian. I mean, she used to talk to Gladstone and Disraeli and these kind of people. And during the battle for Skodra in 1912, I don't know if she fought or she was a nurse, but she used to go and live with the mountain tribes and that. And she explored these mountains. She was the first non-Albanian to do it, and probably the first person, because I don't think the Albanians ever explored them much either. And she was the first person to get to Theth. And she sketched and she recorded all these old folk traditions and costumes and stuff, and she was just this passionate advocate for everything Albanian. And in the end, it was quite sad because she died after Hodder had come to power, and so couldn't go to Albania in the end, but she was still a passionate advocate for everything Albanian. And there's this monument to her on the top of the pass, and that was great. And then we drove back, had a final night with Maren, and then it was it was the next day to the airport. We hired a taxi, it cost us €50. There were no buses, and we drove to the border, across the border, and then drove through the southern bit of Montenegro, which is actually all Albanians living there. I think it's Tulsia is the name of the place, to the airport. We got to the airport. The bags weren't there. Apparently they'd send them to Belgrade. Well, we'd been to Belgrade, they weren't there, so I'm not very happy about that. But we were in the airport and we waited for the plane. Planes were all late, but they weren't significantly late, so there was by and large no incidents. And we went to Vienna and then Munich and then back to Manchester. And in Manchester, our bags were there. The Belgrade had sent our bags back to Manchester. So that was nice. And it was really good because all the money was in there, and the clothes, and nothing had gone missing. So it was a nice end to the trip. And that was that. So that's the end of this. And I'm going to say goodbye for now, but I am going to do another video where I sum up on the whole thing. Keep traveling.